Oh, it's gone now. It will go now.
I watched it.
Yeah.
Just
It will
what's
go.
going on with the sun at now.
Yeah, it will go now. It will be fine.
That promise it won't return.
Yeah. Oh, look at what he. Sri Hari. What a delightful evening yesterday. Huh? Computer. Nothing else except that. But when in doubt, restart. Now we knew that.
Restart.
Yeah,
We
reboot.
can figure out and it's been jumping off.
Yeah, it has. Even upstairs it's bad. We need. I'm going to talk to Craig in the
Okay.
break.
Yeah, it's jumped up here twice this morning.
What are we doing now?
Just
Oh,
the-
that'll help it not jump.
No.
Oh, that's it. Okay, never mind. I'm only thinking of this. Yes, it's jumping all over the place. Where is that golden Ganesha? Bring him and put him on the plate there. And yeah, right in the middle of all this. Om Namaha. He made it work at the end yesterday.
Yeah. Only him.
I didn't know he does internet.
Huh?
He does internet too?
He does internet, yes. That's better than anyone I know. Where did we stop?
We're on 13. 13.5.
5 or 6?
5.
You finished 5?
No.
Oh, we have to do 5. Oh, we only done 4. Oh, plus that Sanakadhyaihi Tushakandana Vasvritha. That's the one.
That's the one.
The winnowing the husk.
Yes, that's the one.
The other one we haven't done.
No, not at all.
Oh dear. Okay. We'll do it now. So who all is here today? Nice. Yeah, if this goes off again, they are threatening to go to live stream. We hope it functions. Yeah, to say we are having internet issues is a euphemism. Yeah. Namah Shivaya. Rahul Darshan hasn't happened for a long time.
Cool.
Yeah.
If there's a.
Come. Bring it little closer. Why so far away? There we go, much better. And you were sitting over here. Yeah,
Usually, but not on the stool.
not on that stool. Okay.
I'm good.
Yeah. You can bring your chair there. Yeah. And can you take that board away, please? Yes. Something is blinking.
If it stops.
Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yeah. Now, अथ सिद्धान्त सर्वस्वम्
अथ सिद्धान्त सर्वस्वम्
शृणु भक्तिरसायनम्
शृणु भक्तिरसायनम्
जन्म मृत्युजरा व्याधि भेषजन्तद्रसायनम्
जन्म मृत्युजरा व्याधि भेषजं तद्रसायनम्
धर्मार्थकाममोक्षाणाम्
धर्मार्थकाममोक्षाणाम्
ज्ञानवैराग्ययोरपि
ज्ञानवैराग्ययोरपि
अन्तःकरणशुद्धिश्च
अन्तःकरणशुद्धिश्च
भक्तिः परमसाधनम्
भक्तिः परमसाधनम्
ययात्र रक्त्या जीवोऽयम्
ययात्र रक्त्या जीवोऽयम्
दधाति ब्रह्मरूपताम्
ददाति ब्रह्मरूपताम्
साधिता सनकाद्यैः
साधिता सनकाद्यैः
सा भक्तिरित्यभिधीयते
सा भक्तिरित्यभिधीयते
सर्वासाधनसम्पत्तिः
सर्वासाधनसम्पत्तिः
अस्ति भक्तिस्तु नास्ति चेत्
अस्ति भक्तिस्तु नास्ति चेत्
तर्हि साधनसम्पातः
तर्हि साधनसम्पातः
तुषखण्डनवद्वृथा
तुषखण्डनवद्वृथा
यद्यदन्यत् साधनं नास्ति
यद्यन्यत् साधनं नास्ति
भक्तिरस्ति महेश्वरे
भक्तिरस्ति महेश्वरे
तदा क्रमेण सिद्ध्यन्ति
तदा क्रमेण सिद्ध्यन्ति
विरक्तिज्ञानमुक्तयः
विरक्तिज्ञानमुक्तयः
न हि कश्चित् भवेन्मुक्तः
न हि कश्चित् भवेन्मुक्तः
ईश्वरानुग्रहं विना
ईश्वरानुग्रहं विना
ईश्वरानुग्रहादेव
ईश्वरानुग्रहादेव
मुक्तिरित्येष निश्चयः
मुक्तिरित्येष निश्चयः
Yeah, I thought it was yad. Let us do 5 again. Yadyanyat sadhanam nasti.
यद्यन्यत् साधनं नास्ति
Bhaktirasti maheshware.
भक्तिरस्ति महेश्वरे
Tada kramena siddhyanti.
तदा क्रमेण सिद्ध्यन्ति
Virakti jnana muktayaha.
विरक्तिज्ञानमुक्तयः
Yeah. So this is a contrast typically found in the Upanishads and in other Vedanta works. Sometimes you give the bad news first and then the good news, and sometimes you give the good news first and then the bad news. What happens if you do this versus what happens if you don't do this? And this is a section on what?
Do it.
Bhakti. Yeah. So what happens if you have bhakti and what happens if you don't cultivate bhakti? Both are given. First is the scenario of a person who has spent several lifetimes gaining the qualifications. We saw that in detail. Shama check, Dhamma check, Upariti check. Have we done this verse? Check, check. So, so what, and only one thing is missing. What is missing? Bhakti, aka Shraddha. That, the Shraddha Bhakti is a form of Shraddha. Bhakti means trust. Bhakti, as I described last time, is Parama Prema Swarupa. Sa. It is of the form of the, utmost love. And the utmost love is reserved for the love of the self. So that self-love, knowing what that self is, and this is Sage Narada's description, we've seen this in detail. And so this bhakti, which is really, I defined it last time as falling in love with love for Bhagavan as everything, including oneself. That is bhakti. And so all the qualifications are there, but the heart is a jaded, faded heart. Then what happens? Does the knowledge come or not? No, the knowledge doesn't come. In fact, the checklist of all the abilities that one has gathered, is what? Is like winnowing not the grain, but taking the husk and then thrashing the husk. Then what will happen? Nothing. Except ayasa. Ayasa means exhaustion. Now, suppose the scenario were the other way around. Shama, cross. Dama, what's that? Uparati, how do you spell that? And then titiksha, what is that? If you don't know anything, and if the person has no qualification, at all for Vedanta, and has stamped on their forehead, unfit for Vedanta, branded, chap, chap means stamped on the forehead, And like sometimes in these government documents, you have these stamps, accepted, and the other one says what? Rejected. Like these government tenders and everything, these bids, rejected, a big stamp. So this person has a stamp on the forehead, rejected by and for Vedanta. Rejected, because they don't have, they say whatever they want to say, they don't have, titiksha, they don't have viveka, they don't have vairagya, they don't have anything, and they don't even know that these have to be cultivated. Something that we have spent so much time talking about. They don't even know how to spell most of the things, and vairagya they have towards things they don't like. That's all. This is their understanding of vairagya. So, but what do they have? Bhakti they have. Then what will happen to that person? Because one is curious, because here in the first scenario, the person has everything except bhakti, and the person is winnowing the, what is the husk. And taking the husk and thrashing the husk in order to get the grain. The grain has already been harvested and the person is still thrashing the stalks after the harvest. So now that is a foolish person, and a person who is, just, tired, exhausted person, because was busy getting an exhaustive list of qualifications. But the heart is dead to the love of self. That is what the whole thing is. But here, everything is dead, all the qualifications are dead, but the heart is alive, it is beating, the person has not gone into cardiac arrest. What is cardiac arrest? Where the heart, the spiritual heart, the emotional heart is unable to beat at the sight of the sunrise, at the sight of, anything that moves one. One must be ready to be moved. Yes. And, there are many moving things. And if one is not ready to be moved, then those moving things become non-moving. Correct? And everything is static, everything is boring. And it's very interesting. Another so-called paradox of Vedanta is that one has to be moved constantly in order to discover the self as unmoving, sthira, it's very interesting. That transformation at the heart level has to take place, and so if one is alive in the heart, what happens is given in verse number 5. So, yadi, if anyat sadhanam nasti, the person doesn't know anything in terms of sadhana. Sadhana means what? They think it's the name of a film star of old Bollywood. There was one sadhana, old, with the black and white films, so do you have sadhana? No, she is dead, or whatever they would say. No, she's an old actress, not there. And so they don't even know sadhana means for gaining the knowledge. They think it's somebody's name, And do you have sadhana? No. And then, but what do you have? Bhakti I have. I have bhakti, but I don't have sadhana. Yadi anyat sadhanam nasti. All the other sadhanas are all gone missing, not there. Don't know how to get it, don't know what it is. Because if you stop somebody on the road and ask them, do you have shama? They won't even know what it means. Okay, forget shama. Do you have vairagya? They will say, I'm developing vairagya towards you. Please get out of my sight. They will not even understand. Okay, maybe they don't know Sanskrit, but then you say, viveka, discernment. Do you have a discerning judgment? You ask the person in the mall, on the street, outside a movie theatre waiting to buy tickets. And they will say, I lack discernment, that's why I'm talking to you. I shouldn't have, got into this conversation. They will not understand. But here is a person who doesn't understand any of those big, things, big qualifications, etc. But anyat sadhana nasti, bhakti asti. Bhakti is there. Towards what? Towards chocolate cake. No! That's why he says Maheshware. Yeah, towards Bhagavan. Mahancha asau Ishwarascha. Towards that who is the Lord of all. Towards the cause of the universe. There is an understanding that there is someone there who is controlling things, because surely I am not in charge, I am not in control. I'm barely in charge of my own body, mind, sense complex, let alone the internet. And I'm not in control of anything, the one who knows. And even though you may not know what is Maheshwara, but what you do know is that something is turning the world, making it go round. Starting with my own world, starting with my own life. Something is making it go round. Sometimes it goes round in circles, sometimes it keeps going as it's supposed to. And there is a flow which I am at odds with sometimes, and which I am able to go with sometimes. That understanding is there. And towards that, and also that's the first thing. Second understanding that is there is that towards that bhakti, towards that there is a certain kind of the heart responds to that in the form of prayer. There is a connection in the form of prayer. So the power of prayer as a transformative entity is understood. Bhagavan as a transformative entity is understood. That I also have a certain power of inhibited transformation to connect with this Bhagavan in the form of prayer is understood. And prayer is taken recourse to as a way of talking with this source, of connecting with the source always, of feeling like one is missing the source. And when will one miss the source? When that source comes alive. Because something that is dead you cannot miss, You can't miss something whose existence you are unaware of. Here, Bhagavan has become alive as an entity, as a conscious entity, which is the same as myself. Even that may not be known. But even the person may be thinking, because the person doesn't know Advaita, is delighting in Dvaita. Delights in Dvaita and, spends a lot of time buying flowers and doing elaborate pujas, or just sitting and talking to Bhagavan in a park bench, making everyone doubt if this person is is demented in some way. Because who talks like that, but harmless, Pujya Swamiji talked of one such person who was some kind of a priest. But he was a little soft in the head, developmentally challenged, and so nobody would give him the job of a head priest. He would just be like an assistant to the head priest. A gopher, go bring the malas, go bring the light, go bring the camphor, go make this mala, things like that, go sweep, go mop, he was that kind of a person. but thoroughly happy with himself and a great bhakta. And his idea of fun was to, on his day off, was to collect enough money and ride the bus all day long and get a window seat, sit in the window and wave to everybody. And just ride the bus all day long. And he was a traditional man, he had that, what is that called? That choti. He had that kudumi here. And on the day off, he would let it loose and let it fly in the wind and ride the bus all day long. And then he was he was so delighted with himself and with everything. And he would just be saying, "Oh Bhagavan, this bus is so wonderful. Oh Bhagavan, you are so wonderful that I'm getting to sit in the bus." Day after day, and he would just wave to the people, very happy. And and then he grew old and died. And then, Pujya Swamiji said that to his funeral, the whole village came, thousands of people. There was nobody who did not know him. And what stood out at his funeral is how happy he made them just by being a bhakta. Simple bhakta, nothing, no Vedanta, nothing. And because that bhakti is infectious, because he was seeing everything as a gift of Bhagavan. There was no Advaita there. "Oh, how nice you have made me ride this bus." He would say like this. "How nice you have, this person came and shook hands with me. How lovely. It's all because of your grace. And how nice that I'm getting to do this." And then after a few years of this, the bus driver and the bus company decided to let him ride for free. "Oh, how nice. You have given me this free. I'm free." And then also he was such a helpful nature that whatever he collected, he would pay somebody else's fare, somebody who could not afford, or some child who didn't have shoes. He would give the money and say, "Go buy yourself shoes," things like that. And so, so let's say there is a person like that, a complete simpleton in terms of Vedanta, but greatly wise in terms of seeing the whole world as a manifestation of Bhagavan. That is what bhakti asti maheshware. There is still Dvaita. It's not that, there is Advaita here. But one is delighting in Dvaita. And this is what you see. And that is why ISKCON is so wonderful, because it makes you fall in love with Bhagavan as an enforced qualification in order to belong to that. And Bhagavan has to be alive. And that's what you see in the temples. And one thinks, especially these, the Britishers, when they came, they didn't understand. They would go to the temple, and that's why they were called collectors. To this day, they are collecting the revenue of the temples and using it for other things. But the temples, the people used to go, they didn't understand. First we have Suprabhatam, waking up Bhagavan. It's a seva. So you wake up at 4 o'clock, get ready and go to the temple, and then the temple doors are still closed, and you sing a wake up song, which has the sentiment of, if you don't wake up, how will the three worlds, how will they run? Bhuhu will be gone, Bhuvaha will be gone, Suvaha will be gone. Please wake up. Mangalam Kuru. If you don't wake up, the sun will not rise, and I am waiting for you to wake up. Hope you've had a good night's sleep. Please wake up. And then you fan them with the fly whisk, yak tail feathers, and then, not feathers, yak tail fibers. And then you fan them when they wake up. And then there is the bath, because everything that you do to yourself, you wish somebody woke you up like that. My whole world depends on you. Please wake up. So you do that because for you Bhagavan is an entity. For a Hindu, the Bhagavan is an entity. It's a relationship. So from morning to night you relate. So then you give them a bath, because that's what you do. You wake up, you have a bath, then you give them breakfast, morning, naivedya. You have 3 meals, you give them also 3 meals, And then, you have, and then after a while, giving darshan to so many people, you say, Bhagavan, you must be tired. And especially in baby Krishna temples, because it's baby Krishna, he gets tired easily. Baby Krishna is taking a nap suddenly, and you're waiting nicely in line. When you come to the front of the door of the temple, the sanctum shuts. Why? He's a baby, he needs a massage, he needs some rest. No, but why me? Well, it's your karma, that's why. Then you have to wait. Doesn't take a long nap, half an hour nap, 15-minute nap, and then the temple doors will open again, and then Bhagavan is ready to give darshan again. But this is all our own superimposition. Bhagavan never gets tired, neither does Bhagavan sleeps. If Bhagavan sleeps, this whole world will go into pralaya. Simple. There will be no world. Bhagavan sleeps means nothing will be there. But, you can sleep, Bhagavan will not sleep. So, what is this? This is a bhavana. And this bhavana is a conscious superimposition of my wants and feelings onto that which has no wants. And why does this superimposition, why is this allowed? Because the whole world of relationships is conducted subjectively with superimpositions of all kinds. Really. If it was an objective world, I tell you, nobody would get married. Simple. Yeah. And, and so therefore, it's a subjective world. You're relating to the concept of the person. You're not relating to the person. Even after 50 years of marriage, you're relating to what you think that person is in your heart. That's what it is. And what does the other person do? Keep trying to match that image and fail miserably. And meanwhile, they also have an image of you that you are also trying to match. That's what it is. So the whole world is all about superimposition. In fact, everything is adhyasa. Sunrise is the biggest spoof. It's a superimposition. Does the sun really rise? No. In fact, Ptolemy said that and he lost his life because nobody believed him at that time. They all thought he was mad and he was a heretic. And that's why he was killed because of his understanding. So, even now, we still say sunrise and sunset. If you look at the weather channel, they will say sunrise 6:04 a.m. sunset 7:08 p.m. How do they know? Because they see when the sun left and it got dark, but that is just the seeing. But seeing is not what is true. So starting with the day, the sun rising is itself a superimposition. That phenomenon, that observable phenomenon is a superimposition. And then what else? Morning is 8 to 12. Who said that? It's my own superimposition. Time is the greatest superimposition. This is my room. Who told you that? Dismantle the walls and the ceilings, you will be in open air. Yeah, what makes your room? Walls make the room? No. The walls are, like it's like a person living in a flat. So what is it that belongs to you? Do you own the land? No, I'm living on the 4th floor. Okay, so you don't own the land. Do you own the floor? No, that is the 3rd floor wala's ceiling. Do you own the ceiling? No, that is the 5th floor wala's floor. Do you own the outside walls? No, that belongs to the cooperative society. Do you own the inside walls? No, that is shared between my bathroom and his living room. Meaning if the walls were not there, I would be bathing in his living room. And so what do you own? I own space. Can you own space? Really, this is how it is. So the whole world of transactions is lived in superimposition. This we have to understand. It's a subjective world of adhyasa, anyonya adhyasa, mutual superimposition of everything. So you just superimpose things that are not there. Even something simple as this purple flower. Purple flower is throwing out the color purple. In fact, it is not accepting the color purple. Very interesting. So that color, the fact that I am saying this is a purple flower is itself a superimposition, because in fact that flower appears to be purple when in fact it is rejecting the color purple. How funny. It appears to be all purple. And it appears to be black. We think black is no color. In fact, black is all colors. It's absorbing everything. It appears to be white because it's rejecting everything. Very interesting. And so the whole thing, our perceptions are all, are all completely, skewed. Completely skewed. You can make anyone believe anything. That's why the people who are mathematicians, they have fun, because you can design exciting optical illusions. There's one professor in Japan, mathematician, and just mind-boggling. Mind-boggling things that appear to defy gravity, and it's just a matter of perception. You think, he'll put one ball, on a steep gradient. That's what you're saying, see, and the ball slides up effortlessly and sits there. He puts another one that also slides up, and you say, oh my God, what is happening? And then you turn it, and from that point you see it's not sliding downward at all. In fact, it is sliding upward. It's all perception. In fact, that you see something, Dvaita itself is a superimposition. And so, really to say that, I don't want to have this false relationship with waking up the Lord of the universe when he's already awake or she's already never asleep. Why should I do that? That is rubbish. Then in that sense, don't enjoy anything. Don't have any relationship. Stop interacting, go into permanently vegetative state. Because anything that you do, all the interactions that you have, everything is based on two things. One is duality, and all duality is firmly footed in what? Misperceptions and superimpositions. Subjective perception. It's all superimposed. Even the most, intimate relationship, mother and child, the child has superimposed something upon the mother and the mother on the child. And that there is no relationship more intimate because she has carried the baby, within her body. And so therefore, everything is just a superimposition. And somehow it works, right? Yeah. We still call ourselves reasonably sane. Yeah. And we still manage to lead our lives gracelessly, but we do manage to lead our lives somehow. Correct? And we also manage to have fun. We can enjoy the superimposition as long as we know that it is superimposed, and sometimes we enjoy it even though we know that it is not, we don't know that it is superimposed. We still enjoy it. Somehow the whole thing works not because of you, it's despite you. In spite of you it works. And so bhakti means that ability to enjoy. That's really what it is. It is like falling in love with the love for everything. And love for everything is really self-love in the highest instance, in the highest capacity. And so in the Hindu Dharma, last time I talked about worship. The worship is a studied, deliberate superimposition. A superimposition that has psychological effects on one's well-being. It increases the well-being. It's all psychology. It's so fantastic. It is studied. You have to try it. Otherwise, you cannot dismiss it without trying it. Whenever I go, people say, oh, can you talk to my teenage son, teenage daughter? And this is what I say. You are free to reject the tradition, but only after you try it. This is what your parents told you about food. You have to try the spinach, and then you need not eat it, but you have to try everything. You cannot come to the conclusion, I don't like it, or this doesn't work. How can you say it doesn't work when you don't try it? No, I'm not trying it because I'm hopeless. Okay, well, the antidote to hopelessness is this itself. So you cannot say, I'm not trying the antidote to hopelessness because I'm hopeless. You have to try it. And so this whole worship is designed to cultivate and activate that self-love. And designed to get away from that miserable self. When I say self-love, I mean self as in, Atma. And it's designed to get away from that miserable jivatvam from which I suffer. This is what it is. It's a foolproof method. So don't I have anything better to do at 5 in the morning than to wake up Bhagavan when I'm barely awake myself? Well, that's the whole point. In that superimposition, there is a loss of whatever ails me. Yes, that ailment is called samsara. So in that superimposition and that enactment of duality, that samsara, that in fact that enactment of duality resolves the inner duality. Very fully paradoxical. That's how it is. So this bhakti, which is an enacted based on certain superimpositions. What are the superimpositions here? That Bhagavan is, is just like me. I love fruits, so therefore I'm going to offer fruits. I love this, so whatever one loves, one offers. And then what, Bhagavan is sad, needs, Bhagavan is tired. All these things. This is a deliberate anthropomorphization. And in that deliberate anthropomorphization, I understand the fact that Bhagavan is alive, is sentient, is a conscious being. That's what I have to understand. And that conscious being resolves in me. That is a later understanding. But first this duality has to be celebrated. And we don't fool anybody. We consciously say this is a superimposition. Like Vishnu. Vishnu means Sarva Vyapi, the Lord of the universe who is all pervasive. Saligrame Vishnum Dhyayet. In the Himalayas you get these fossilized shells, that have the insignia of Vishnu. Some of them have this circular, what is that called? Chakra. And some of them have that other kind of conch shell called, Shankha. So, and the Shastra says, in that saligrama is just a stone. What do you do in this stone? Invoke Vishnu. How big is Vishnu? Sizeless. You know what happened to Vamana? Vamana was 2.5 foot fellow who went to knock off the ahankara of a king who thought he was great. He was a great giver. And this Vishnu took on the avatara of a little person and went off begging. And King Bali was in a great grand mood after his bath. What do you want? He was giving everything freely to anybody who asked, and he was greatly proud of his kingdom and his wealth, and had started to have certain ideas of world domination. But really a bhakta. And Vishnu goes out of love to teach him a lesson by squeezing his ahankara out. That's what he takes a little safety pin, Yeah. And then, this little, he's disguised as Vamana, the dwarf, and this little person goes, and the king, has to kneel down to his level. What would you like to get? He says, I need space. Three footsteps. And he's wearing a size 2 shoe, and the king, everybody in the court of the king laughs. Everybody laughs. And the king says, no, we have to honor his request. Yes, take. And suddenly, 1 foot becomes big enough to cover all land, all planets, hot, cold, medium, everything, all spaces where the foot can be, it covers. And the other foot covers space itself. And then, everybody is worried. Okay, now what? And then he says, where shall I take my 3rd foot? And King Bali says, right here. That's the only place left, is my head that is in the clouds. And so he pushes him to the nether world where he reigns over the unconscious. That's what the ahankara has to do. King Bali signifies, symbolizes the ahankara which has to reign over and parent the unconscious. That's what it is. But that story aside, the Sarvavyapi Vishnu, this is Vishnu, whose 1 foot is, this is what Purusha Sukta says. Tripadasya Amritam Divi. Tripad Urdhva Udait Purusha. After these 3 feet, it's not that, it's not that that's it. It more limitless than the 3 measures of the foot. So that limitless, that complete limitlessness, here, one is told to evoke that in this miserable stone where a little insect smaller than the stone has carved out something out of its own fear. How that Vishnu can enter this little miserable stone? Because this is the truth of the tradition, is that every stone, every rock is non-separate from Vishnu. That's what it is. Every rock is, everything is Bhagavan. So you can be free enough to invoke that Bhagavan in a stone. That's the glory of this. Again, as a deliberate superimposition. And then you take another stone, there it is. And what you say? This is not Vishnu. People will be very clear. No. What is this? Shiva. And you just go diving, glub, glub, glub in the Narmada, and you pick out what comes, and this is what comes, and this is Lord Shiva. This is what it is. And so the whole thing is a deliberate superimposition for the sake of understanding that which is beyond superimpositions. In fact, it's the only thing that is beyond superimposition. So the bhakti is actually very close to knowledge, because you cannot do bhakti without some understanding of this. Very interesting. And even if you do it without any understanding, something happens as a result of this. The understanding comes. One becomes humbler, one becomes more surrendered, more devoted, and in complete thrall of what is. Because the more you surrender, the less there is of you, the more Bhagavan pervades you. You understand that. And so therefore, sadhanam atra nasti. Yadi anyat sadhanam nasti, no other sadhana is there, but bhakti, aka Shraddha, trust in Bhagavan, trust that something is, doing this, and that's the only and primary relationship. My first identity is that of a devotee. Then I become a son and daughter. Then I become a spouse. Then I become mother, father. Then I become employer, employee. That is what the whole idea is, to discover oneself as the devotee. If somebody has managed to do that this comes first and this is my primary understanding, then what? Tada, then in that case, what happens? Kramena siddhyanti. Gradually one gains. What does one gain? Vairagya. Vairagya comes. Because if this is my primary relationship, and I'm spending time waking Bhagavan and putting Bhagavan to sleep and feeding Bhagavan 3 times a day, then do I have time to get depressed? No. Do I have time to get angry? No. Do I have time to get mad? No. Do I have time to gossip? No. Simple. No, but who wants to do it 3 times a day? How will I go to work? Okay, do it once a day. Do it twice a day, whenever, And in fact, we say the work is non-separate from Bhagavan. If everything is Bhagavan, work is not Bhagavan, work is also Bhagavan. Work is Bhagavan. And so what do you do at work? Worshipfully work. Worshipfully go to work. Worshipfully come back from work. Worshipfully be. Work itself is a form of worship. Because that is what is Karma Yoga, is seeing worship in everything, seeing Bhagavan in everything, and that puts me well on the road to this understanding. So Vairagya comes because I'm doing everything for the sake of discovering myself as a devotee. The sake of doing this for knowledge has not yet come, because one doesn't know what the knowledge is. Vairagya comes. How does Vairagya come? Because I am growing emotionally, because I am only participating or primarily participating in the only relationship that works, because this superimposition happens, this is the only superimposition that happens to be true. Every rock is Bhagavan. Really, it's true. It's a fact. It's a fact that is waiting to be discovered. It's a fact that cannot be logically arrived at, because it is shown by the Shastra. Bhagavan is not, Ishvara is not revealed logically. You know, there must be a maker, because it's a complex world. And you know, just like the computer has a maker because it's a complex entity. So, therefore, tasmat, you know. But wait a minute, computer was built by many people. Hardware person, software person, you know, and middleman, gopher, all these things, people. China, of course, without China, no computer is and, you know, so everybody had a hand in it. So therefore, logically, what do I conclude? You know, many Ishvaras. Ishvaraha. Many Ishvaras. That's why Hinduism has many gods, because it's a complex universe and so many gods are there, and this god and that god, and you know, what is it? One god for headache, one god for earache, one god for, you know, this, that. One god for obstacles, one god for other things, one god for knowledge, because so many, this is a complex world with complex people, with complex desires, and then, you know, therefore we need many gods. Some people talk like this. Nonsense. Nonsense. So, here, you know, Ishvara is, you know, this is not logically given. That Ishvara exists is not a logical conclusion. That Ishvara is you. You can beat logic black and blue, but you will not get this understanding. You can squeeze logic out of everything that it has to give, because logic is a pramana that covers inference. So this is not gained out of inference. Neither it, you know, just suddenly comes. It is gained because of the knowledge of the Shastra, for which one has to be a bhakta, really. And so that bhakti, if you don't have, cultivate it starting now. That's what it is. Cultivate that bhakti. And for the person whose bhakti is cultivated, the one who understands oneself as a devotee, then what happens? Vairagya comes, because one has grown emotionally. One does not grow emotionally as a result of superimposition of other relationships, because the superimposition of the, you know, mother and the father in the growing teenager is not going to give happiness. And the superimposition of one partner over the other is going to leave one miserable, because that is a superimposition waiting to explode, waiting to dissolve, waiting to disappoint. It's not going to work. But this superimposition works, because ultimately, even though I'm saying it's a superimposition, it's not a superimposition, because everything happens to be Bhagavan. Bhagavan is manifest as non-separate from this effect which is called the universe. So the effect being non-separate from the cause, this is not a superimposition. That I see it as a superimposition is the superimposition, but it is not a superimposition. This is a very sophisticated understanding of Bhagavan that one has to really cultivate the emotional maturity to understand. So every other thing disappoints. Bhagavan doesn't disappoint. If you say Bhagavan disappoints, then you know what is disappointing is that the bhakti is yet to be cultivated. That's what Bhagavan doesn't disappoint, because Bhagavan is you. And that Bhagavan, which is the maker of the universe, Bhagavan disappoints because I did not get what I want. And the bhakta, how will they reckon with that? Well, Bhagavan knows best what I want. And so the vairagya towards what I want is transformed. And also, if you keep going without what you want, then you forget that you wanted it. Take something in your house that's a prized possession and hide it somewhere in the attic. And then after 6 months, you will not forget that you even owned it. That's what will happen. First 2 days, oh, there's an empty space in the living room. Oh, this used to be there. Oh, I used to like looking at it. And afterwards you say, oh, you don't even think about it. And after 6 months or 1 year, go to the attic. It's here. Well, I never liked it anyway. Let it be here. You don't miss it. Really. And so, this is what the whole thing is. So, all the relationships will disappoint. Bhakti doesn't disappoint because here is a fact. So you are learning to relate to each and everything, including your own wants, from the place of devotion. And when you say Bhagavan is in charge, it's not a superimposition, it's a fact. It's a fact I better come to terms with as quickly as possible, because otherwise I am the one left wanting. Bhagavan doesn't say, I miss you not invoking me. No, and he's going to say that later. It's for you. It's for your own growth. And so Vairagya comes because my focus is on bhakti. My focus is on leading my life in tandem with the flow. And that is very time consuming, really. So where is the time for, complaining? Where is the time for just feeling disappointed? Feeling out of sorts? No time at all. And so therefore, bhakti doesn't disappoint. And so bhakti creates Vairagya towards all the things in the universe, because you become such a person, so surrendered, that if I'm meant to have it, it will come. And it does come. Don't cook for a few days. If you're meant to eat, food will come. Yeah, food will come. But today it didn't come. Well, because it will take 1 or 2 days. It will come. Yeah. If you are in orange, it comes instantly. And if you are not yet in orange, it will come eventually. Yeah, it will come. Don't cook. Don't tell the neighbor I'm not cooking. Nothing. Don't advertise. And if you are meant to eat, if you are not meant to starve, food will definitely come. Don't take yourself to a restaurant. Desist from everything. You will be surprised. Suddenly one phone call will come. Birthday, please come. Is there food? Yes. Suddenly, out of the blue, we are going to a restaurant, we want to invite you. Then you can go. Okay, this is how it is. And so the bhakta lives like that. You live for a day. Today you can make a plan. Tomorrow you don't know. And that's why all the elders in India, as children, we used to make plans and we used to say, you can't have this today. If the mother or the grandmother said that, immediately the child would say, what? Can I have this tomorrow? Let us be alive and see. Even now in India, people talk like this. It's not a depressive talk. Oh, I think I've just had it. I think I'm going to fold up shop tomorrow. No. It's not a suicidal thought. It's an objective thought. If we are alive and if the stomach is functioning, and if you really want to have this tomorrow, let us see. Right now, it's not there. Deal, So it's all, bhakti makes you live in the now, and that's why it creates Vairagya. Because if you're not in charge, why make plans and, make Bhagavan laugh? Yeah. They say if you want to tickle Bhagavan, you make plans. You make all kinds of plans and then you tell him also. These are the plans I have made for my life in the next janma, in the next yuga. Bhagavan will laugh. That is what it is. So here bhakti and vairagya are connected simply because of the fact that bhakti makes you a person living in the present. Because bhakti allows you to lay down the burden of your life at the altar of surrender, which is Bhagavan. And when the burden is no longer there, then what happens? You're not worried about tomorrow. Today somehow took care of itself. Tomorrow also will. What if it doesn't? Well, we'll think about it tomorrow. Why think about it now? And one thing about tomorrow, what is it? It never comes. Thank God. So since tomorrow never comes, then what? I have to only be worried about what? Today. And today is already here. Half of it will be soon over. So what's the worry? And so therefore, this is what, that there is that breakage from trying to be the author and the reproducer of my own life, which is a big burden, I tell you. And bhakti means laying down that burden. And so the person doesn't have shama, dama, nothing, no viveka, no vairagya, but laying down the burden is a greatest act of vairagya, and it shows that I have the trust and I surrender everything, and whatever comes, let it happen. You are there, you take care of it. Wherever you are, however, Kidrishosi Mahadeva, I don't know what you look like, but whatever you look like, wherever you are situated, take care of this. There is one prayer. Take care of this, because I don't know how, to do this. And that helplessness is constantly affirmed, because that helplessness, the sense of helplessness is real. I don't control the shots. I don't call the shots. And so that helplessness is surrendered at the altar that is completely the source of all help. So what is remaining? Nothing, no helplessness. The helplessness has been absorbed in the sponge called Bhagavan. That's what it is. And so, then if bhakti is there, vairagya automatically comes, because the two are connected. First I have vairagya towards my own emotions, towards my own burden called life. Then I have vairagya towards everything else. And then what? Jnanam comes. Because even though one is a milker bhakta, wants to milk Bhagavan for favors. Give me this, give me that. So one is a give me this, give me that bhakta. And then Bhagavan will watch the bhakti, because Bhagavan gives you things you don't ask for also, like a headache. And did you ask for it? Not that I remembered. And so Bhagavan gives, and not just, bad things, even good things. Your own karma is put in a nice wrapping paper. Yeah. It's like a Christmas stocking. Sometimes you get nice toys, and sometimes you get a lump of coal. Yeah. Why do you get coal? Because I was very bad. I was a bad child. Bad means what? Yeah. Papa, that's all it is. So sometimes, so Santa Claus is the Western form of Bhagavan. Yes. Bringing karma phala once a year. If you are good, you get gifts, nicely wrapped presents. And if you are bad, you get a lump of coal in the stocking. Stocking means the place where you take stock. That's why it is called stocking. That's all it is. So this is what it is. So Bhagavan gives, he's keeping on giving gifts. Correct? And then what? And one of the gifts that Bhagavan gives, promise that is given, is what? Name bhaktaha pranashyati. My bhakta will not be destroyed. How does Bhagavan ensure that the bhakta, the true bhakta, is not destroyed? By giving that knowledge that you are indestructible. That the Atma, which is the Self, is beyond all destruction, beyond all distractions. This is what you are. So that gift is given because of the bhakti, because of that punya packaged, and then you open the gift, and then out pops Guru. Yes! The Guru is the present of bhakti. Yes. Guru is a gift directly from Bhagavan. It just doesn't come via FedEx, because it's inconvenient, and you're not allowed to ship live things via FedEx. And all these air holes and everything, it's a problem. Guru needs to breathe. He's embodied, correct? And so the Guru comes in other ways. In other ways, suddenly Guru comes, and then the Bhakta, you may say, I'm not looking for the Guru. But then accepts the Guru as a present from Bhagavan. Bhakta was not interested in the knowledge. Bhakta was just busy doing bhakti. But then suddenly this Guru has come out of the blue. Guru came And Guru was practically left on the doorstep. Because I never went to ashram. The person can argue. I was not interested in the knowledge. I never went to ashram. Ding ding, bell rang. Who is that? A guru who was lost, seeking the way. How can Guru be lost? No, that was just, Guru was just enacting the fact that you were lost. Guru did not have GPS, that's all. Guru had satsang somewhere down the street, did not know the way. So, rang the bell on your door instead. This actually happened, I was with Pujya Swamiji going to satsang to somebody's house, and somebody said, this is the address. And we rang the door and a very surprised family opened the door. Because, Pujya Swamiji standing at their doorstep. Oh my God, what happened? And, Swamiji is also looking surprised because these were not the people. So he is looking inside, and Pujya Swamiji is delightful. He just walked in. Amazing. He knew perhaps they needed this blessing. He just walks in and he was asking for direction. We didn't know. We thought it was this, and he walked in and hurriedly they just cleared one chair. He sat down also. And they're all in a flurry trying to bring something to drink and making tea. Because Pujya Swamiji travelled in an entourage of all kinds of people, and sometimes demanding people, less coffee for me. Mine is without sugar. I'm diabetic. No, for me make tea because I don't take coffee. Do you have milk? Just give me milk. And if you have some badam powder, mix that in. Yeah. We were Pujya Swamiji's samsara. For a non-samsari, really, because he was kind enough to suffer all of us and take all of us around. And only one time I have seen, because one time Pujya Swamiji lost it and said something, because we were in a big gathering and one person said, "Can I have some tea? Where is the tea?" So, and of course this was a very inappropriate place to have, it was a public place. Where will they have tea, They brought Pujya Swamiji tea from somewhere because, he was the speaker, but not for the rest of the riffraff that is accompanying the Guru. But then somebody loudly demanded tea sitting next to, the talk had yet to start. So we were ushered into a kind of a living room, a little staying room before we went into the hall. This was in some big church. And person said, "Tea, where is my tea?" And I looked around and I was very embarrassed. Everybody was very embarrassed. And I just hurriedly got up to go make tea from somewhere or go, drive somewhere and bring the tea before, everything ensued. And I was sitting right next to Pujya Swamiji. Pujya Swamiji was on the chair, I was on the floor. And he just put a hand on my shoulder. He knew where my mind was going. And he looked at the person and said, "You keep quiet and sit down." Never heard of Pujya Swamiji talk like that. And he said, "What? What tea? Sit down, keep quiet. He didn't say keep quiet, he said don't talk, sit down, stop talking." That was the only time. But the rest of the time, if you went to people's houses, everybody in Pujya Swamiji's entourage made themselves feel as though they were in their own houses. And the people obliged, no problem. And here too, in the perfect house of strangers, the kitchen has suddenly come alive. And they are making all kinds of things. And then, the woman of the house comes laden with all the trays of teas and coffees and everything. And she's beaming, delighted. And she says, "I can't tell you how much we are praying every day. And it is like Bhagavan has blessed us. Were you looking for a guru?" I asked, because I was wanting to know how come Pujya Swamiji entered this house. They said, "No, but we are so glad we have found one. We were not looking for anything because we were surrendered to Bhagavan. But if Bhagavan has sent us this is what we need." And Pujya Swamiji unhurriedly is chatting with all of them. Oh yeah, that village. Do you know that person from that village? Yes, wonderful. Oh, come along, we are going to a talk. And then by this time the right address, which was 2 blocks down, had been found, and the whole family also joined us. And they became, interested in the knowledge. All through bhakti. Because Pujya Swamiji entered their house after they had done puja on a Thursday. Think about this. This is all not an accident. So how does bhakti translate into jnanam? This is how it translates. Kramena, slowly, 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 sometimes spread over millennia and sometimes in this life itself. So first bhakti comes, and then after bhakti, vairagya comes, dispassion towards everything else. The kind of dispassion that is exemplified in a very rudimentary way by the by the story of Hanumanji. Being very pleased with Hanumanji, Mother Sita gifts him a beautiful pearl necklace. Freshwater pearls, very difficult to cultivate and expensive. And then what does he do? He bites into each one, looks and goes, pooh, pooh, spits it. And Lakshmana, who is very protective of his sister Sita, he's just, he takes out his knife. He says, monkey, you don't even know the value of this. Forget the value of the pearls, the sentimental value of this gift bestowed to you upon Mother Sita. What are you looking for? And Hanuman, being the quintessential bhakta, he says, there is no Rama inside these pearls. That's why I'm throwing them away. So that is vairagya. Because what will these pearls do to me? It's not that there is no Rama. Rama is in my heart. And Rama is not in the pearls, meaning that Atma, Anatma difference. So vairagya, everything is Bhagavan. And therefore, I am completely taken care of. I don't need anything. I don't want anything other than you and your grace to be forever on me. That grace translates into knowledge, kramena, after vairagya. So first bhakti comes, and then what comes? Vairagya comes, because you know that nothing you do is working. Bhagavan is everything. And then because of that, ding ding, Guru shows up in your mailbox or on your doorstep. Yeah, because these are modern ways. You may get a text from the Guru. You don't know. Yeah. So this is where I have to be alert and alive to see this. And then when I see this, then only bhakti translates into jnanam. Supposing those people in whose house Pujya Swamiji entered had at the doorstep said, no, this is not our house, it's over there, please go, then nothing would have happened. So that bhakti fructifies into jnanam gradually, kramena. And then gradually after the break we'll see the next verse. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Very nice.